morning, afternoon, or evening. Let's find out. Can we live a life and be in our own hearts? Is that possible? Hi, Nicole. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good on this beautiful Wednesday. I'm always excited to be here, especially when I read about our guest. I can't wait to talk to her. But I sit here and it's like we're we're going towards the end of July, Glenda. I mean, I know
It's
it's
only
just
the beginning
crazy.
for me.
I know it's absolutely crazy, but I am making it through the summer. Got my girls back from their big 3-week trip to Europe. Got them back last night, or I don't even know. I'm so tired half the time, but they're safe and sound. I'm safe and sound, and I'm happy to be here.
That's what it's all about. It's just living through what you have to, one day at a time. And
Sometimes 1 minute at a time.
and I've been there. I've been there. Trust me, it's all about being present though. So I had a very busy morning and talked to some incredible people. And today though, I want to talk to you about our guest. This is somebody who I met just a short time ago. And I was we have somebody who always seems to be joining us and watching us, and it's so great. But I want to talk about this woman. And what really attracted me to her was just her glow. I have always said this, and I tell people this all the time, that we basically have only a moment to make that first impression. So that moment, unfortunately, has to be with what you see that's standing in front of you, because that's what it all comes down to. It's that moment, that glimpse of when you look at somebody. If you see somebody with a smile, or you see somebody who's kind of miserable, which way you're going to go. You see that smiling face, you're going to go towards that person, because your chances of risk are a lot less than if you see somebody who's kind of miserable. But I'm also the type that if I saw somebody really down and out, I would probably approach them too, because that's kind of part of who I am. But I want to tell you about this woman. Her name is Julia Pazmandy, and I hope I pronounced it right. Has dedicated herself to spreading positivity and helping others on their own personal growth. So that's totally up my alley right there. Born in Siberia, Russia, and having lived in various countries before she has become and settling into Canada. She is part of my tribe. Julia's cosmopolitan upbringing instilled in her appreciation for diversity and a deep empathy for her struggling has helped people through their possible struggles in their world. And through her coping and emotional struggles, she has become the person who is helping others. Despite her challenges, Julia embarks on a successful career as a businesswoman and an entrepreneur, while she managed through 6 businesses while raising her 3 children. However, the pressure and difficulty of upbringing and the demands of a frantic life led Julia to hit an emotional bottom. Seeking guidance and counseling support, she found her own passion for helping others and reaching out on social media to support those who are facing similar challenges. Today, we are going to be talking to Julia on not only how she went through all of these journeys and her own struggles, but what she does in her own course of counseling and life coaching using her 3D approach. So we're not going to talk about anything more until we bring this lovely lady. And hello, Julia. Thank you for joining us today. And you look sensationally beautiful.
Oh my God. Thank you, Glenda. You just made my day.
Well,
I appreciate you ladies having me on your podcast. Thank you so much. I'm very grateful and very excited.
I can't wait to learn about you. And I love her red background, Glenda.
Yes.
Isn't that pretty? And you've got on red, and she's got her. I like feel dull in comparison with you ladies.
It's a red day. It's a beautiful red day.
I like bright colors, so that's just how I am and who I am.
It suits you. It suits you very well.
Does she not sparkle?
Yes, she does.
Okay, so
and I noticed that even she was going out. I mean, there's a good, very, very, very immediate good energy about her that you can pick up on, and I love that. I wish everybody had that, but they don't. But when you find someone that does, you do gravitate towards them. I think that, Glenda. So So Glenda and her tribe mates are here today.
Well, I gravitate towards certain people, and and it's not just being done because I have this ability that I can see the good in people too.
That's
So
wonderful.
when
Well, it takes a good and a kind person to recognize it in others, because usually there is a saying that what we see in others is a representation of us. So when we see somebody kind or caring, technically we're recognizing those qualities because we have them. So, Glenda, it's all you. You seeing you in me.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
do. And I hear you and me when we talked. So let's get in because Nicole hasn't had the pleasure yet of feeling your aura and seeing all about and hearing about you. So first of all, I know you're the positivity and the coach, and your whole thing is about love and light and everything. But we not always have we. I know I haven't come from that. I lived through some pretty dark times, and I see, and I just said to Nicole before we got on, I give people a lot of credit that are born in another country and come, especially when the language is different, and come to another world. I've never experienced that in my life. I've traveled, but traveling and moving homes is two different worlds. So share with us about that whole journey is something else.
I think that when you move in countries, the period to adjust or the way you adjust really has to do with your personality, whether you're a social person or not. Personally, I'm a social butterfly. So I make friends as I move through life. The second thing, of course, is the age. My parents started moving country to country very early in my childhood. The first country we ever sort of resigned was France. Then we moved to Spain, then Cyprus for a few years. And then we finally made it to Canada. And because we were moving so often, by the time we came to Canada, I was turning 17. The adjustment was very natural to me. So I didn't really felt that process. But I think for somebody who's moving in their late 30s or 40s, it's a much harder process because you're leaving your friends behind, you're leaving your families, certain family members behind. And I think that's where the difficulty comes in. However, I also notice that sometimes people tend to move different countries for wrong reasons. And I've seen it with my friends who say, oh my God, I'm going to move to Europe because then my life will be perfect. And then a couple of years later, they come back to Canada saying, well, it didn't work out. My life wasn't perfect. My life was just as sad there as it was here. So I think that the happiness, it's not about the country. It's not about who you're with. It's not about the size of your house or the car you drive.
Wow.
The happiness truly starts from within.
Wow.
And that's where people are struggling to find that self-love, to find that happiness. And I'm not sure if you remember, Glenda, but Glenda and I, Nicole, I'm not sure if you know, we connected over a dinner with David when we sort of mingled, and that's how we got to know each other. And at the dinner, we kind of spoke about what it means being yourself. And I explained that most people, when we're born as kids, we love ourselves, we accept ourselves. However, as we move through our life, our teachers, our peers, our parents, our friends, very good at telling what's wrong with us, whether it's our sense of humor, whether it's the way we look, whether it's the way we talk, or anything else. So as we go through that process, figuring out who we are and getting into adulthood, hearing all that criticism coming at us makes us believe that people that are saying it to us are correct. But here's the tricky part. People are saying that about us from their perspective. And theoretically and technically, most of those people are not the right people to listen to. So I think as we listen to, let's say, wrong people, we start adjusting ourselves and deviating from our true core. And that's when people really hit the rock bottom and that unhappiness level, because they disconnect from who they are from within, because they're too busy making everyone around them happy, satisfying everyone else but themselves. So when push comes to shove and the person is sort of on their own, they face themselves and they realize that they no longer know who they are. And that's where that unhappiness comes from. Because honestly, if somebody is happy and secure with who they are from within, they don't really have issues on the outside with other people, because if you accept yourself, you'll accept others. And B, you're not really trying to chase the dream and satisfy others. You just living your life happy and enjoying the moment and enjoying the present.
But well, let's take that a step further. It also comes into what we're growing up in. Now, I know you said as you're growing up, but it really even starts before that even time. Even as a child, as a baby, if you live in an environment where it's happy and there's lovingness around, then it's one thing. But a child born into a home where there's always anger, there's resentment, there's hostility, there's the tension being there, that child grows up with a different form of insecurities, and that vibration. That vibration is what goes into our core. And it even can start as early as when the child is even in the womb. You know, what a child feels like, we are all energy. And, it's funny, I'm having deja vus and all the rest. I've had several conversations this morning with others. Everybody is on the same playing field. And it's really delightful having these conversations, because, it's true, though. If you're born and while your mother is holding that child, and if she's living in a world where she's unhappy and there's all these horrible energies going through, that's going into the fetus itself. So that is the start of it all going. It's the beginning start of that life. And that energy goes into the fetus, what comes into the baby. And then when that child is born, if that environment is that same thing, it's even before the parents start the criticism. It all begins of the electricity that child is picking up all throughout.
Glenda, I'm really happy you brought this up, because last week I actually had a really eye-opening experience, and maybe somebody will find it, sort of very simple concept that I recognized last week. And to bring you kind of back, I was reading this article that basically explained that if you're planning to have children, first, you truly have to work on yourself and find your center, find your balance, and make sure you truly have the patience to raise the child. Because when we're impatient, what that makes the child feel is that they are burdened. And last week, I actually had, as I said, eye-opening experience and a really strong connection with my middle son, because from the young age, I found that he was very, very emotional. And I had my first child at 23. And when my firstborn was about years old, that's when I had my second son. And at that time, I was the entrepreneur and the businesswoman. So I worked crazy hours. And my kids were, honestly speaking, were raised by nannies at that time, just because I was absent most of the time. Which was, I think, very traumatic on me as a mother. But because I was in such a young age, I was kind of on autopilot, just going and going without recognizing the damage that I'm causing to myself and my children.
Oh, yeah.
So last week, I believe it was Tuesday or Wednesday, I was laying in bed and I was reminiscing how my middle son would come and crawl into bed early in the morning, and he would want the snuggles, before his school bus or before he even would make his breakfast. And again, going back in time, before my self-awareness, before me finding happiness. And actually, I want to touch up on one thing that you said earlier. I always say that happy people cannot be mean. Because when you are happy, when you feel fulfilled within self and you're in balance, you really don't care what other people do. You don't care to judge them. You don't care to criticize them, because you just filled with happiness and joy that you want to spread. So going back to the old times, that's not how I was. Yes, I was always kind and compassionate, but I wasn't always patient. So I remember, and if I'm honestly speaking, 90% of the time when he'd come to me at 5:30 or 6 in the morning, I just wanted to sleep and rest.
Yeah.
So I remember telling him, like as I would cuddle him out of obligation, I would say things like, oh, I'm so tired, like, can you not come tomorrow? Can you just let mommy sleep? Can you let mommy rest? But what I didn't realize is that there always comes that one last time when your child gives you, that innocent hug, or when you actually still cuddling with your child in bed, where you still have that connection with your child before they kind of outgrow it.
Yes.
So as I was laying in bed by myself at this point and reminiscing how he would come and curl up and how much it annoyed me, I actually got very sad, because in that moment, I realized how much kids actually bring to a life of grown-up. Because if you think about it, you can push your child away, you can punish them, you can tell them you're frustrated. But guess what? They're still going to be coming to you with love and affection, wanting to give you their energy, wanting to give you their unconditional love. And I think that's where a lot of parents forget to notice it and forget to see it. And even for myself, I remember always saying to the kids, oh my God, leave me alone. I'm exhausted. Leave me alone. I'm stressed out. But what I failed to recognize is I was exhausted and stressed out from my relationships, from my job, perhaps from driving, from interacting with other adults. And honestly speaking, my kids were my only pure source of energy and unconditional love. And yet I was so blind to it. I was so oblivious to it that I took it for granted. And again, my children are still 13, 14, and 15. So I still have time. Yay. I remember coming to my son after my realization, and I kind of hugged him and I said, remember when you used to be little and you'd come for kisses and hugs and I'd push you away? I leveled with him and I said, you know what? I'm genuinely sorry about that. I realized that I was wrong in that moment, and now I'm realizing how much I miss it. And I opened up to him, and I'm always very vulnerable with my kids, as well as with grown-ups around me. So I just told him that I'm very happy that I woke up now, because I still have time to snuggle him and cuddle him before he turns in 18, 19, or 20. But I did tell him that I regret not recognizing the true value that he was bringing into my life. And I apologize for taking him for granted and pushing his love away. Meanwhile, it was the purest thing that was given to me. And unfortunately, I think that's where parents don't see the power of their children and what the children truly bring to the table. And I think that most grown-ups see their children as burden, somebody you have to pay the bills for, somebody you have to cook for. But what about the energy? What about the love? What about the affection that the child gives you? That's truly priceless. And I can only wish the parents could see what I see now.
Julie, I have to tell you a quick story. I haven't seen my daughter in 7 months. She moved back to Arizona and she's been working there. Well, I picked him up. They had a 3-week tour of Europe. So she came home with me yesterday and she spent one night with me. And this morning, my daughter's going to be 21 in just a few weeks. And she is probably, I'm like 5'5". She's almost 6 foot, outweighs me. She got in my lap this morning. She got in my lap and she says, Mommy, just rock me like a baby for a minute.
Oh my God, I love that. I love that for you.
What kid does that? And I was just like, get over here. And I, tried to get my arms around her, but she did. She sat right in my lap. So you might have a lot more time with your kids than you think.
Oh, I hope so. I find that girls are different than boys.
Sure.
And I have a girl, so yay, I do have more time there. But I find your story so beautiful. And the sad part of it is that your acceptance towards your daughter and how eager you were to hold her and cuddle her is very special. Unfortunately, it's not very common. I work with people who not only don't communicate with their kids, but still consider their kids as baggage rather than a piece of happiness.
I just can't even imagine. My kids were blessings and treasures from the minute they are born until, when she left this morning. And that's not something I really comprehend too well. But when your, almost 21-year-old daughter climbs in your lap, that's special. That's really special.
And you know what? Here's the thing as well, is you have to, like I come from a world, and I've had a lot of people with that as well. But I'd say for most of the people that I've had surrounding me, their kids have always been treated as if they're special. And coming back to what you did before, I remember years ago when my kids were small, I went through a divorce, and it was a very hard divorce. And I remember at one point when I lost it with my son, and I turned around and I felt horrendous for that. And I turned around and I said to him, and it was the start of me changing too. And I said, you know what? I'm really sorry. Mommy made a mistake. I lost my temper on you, and I should never have done that. It had nothing to do with you. Mommy was upset. And I didn't say why, because they didn't need to know. They didn't need baggage onto them, but they needed to know that. And then I did this from that point on. When I did do something, I will always apologize for what I did, because your children also need to know that you're human. Mummies and daddies make mistakes just as little boys and girls do. But the difference is when we make a mistake, we apologize for what we might have hurt somebody else to do, because we make mistakes because we are human. And I think that's really a great message that has to go on as for a parent and younger people. You see, I'm at a point in life where my kids are way beyond you guys. Like, my son now is 35, and my baby is getting married in August, that I tell everybody because I'm excited. And, at 33, and, we still have those incredible moments together. Even with a boy, when he comes and he sees me, the hug is not just a hug, it's a hug.
Oh my God, I'm so happy.
It's a loving hug. And so these things are, it's just the way you bring them up. I was not a child. I was a child who had a lot of love around, but they didn't have the time for me. I had siblings with special needs. I got sort of pushed off to the side, and I felt it as a child, very lonely. And it was something of, I wanted to make sure my kids knew how much they were wanted and loved and needed. And because of that, I spent a lot of time, and I did things for them to make them feel good, even like making sure that there was two of them, that they got one-on-one time with me, because children need to have that too. But learning that all these things, and this is, maybe we should just do one day of just on parenting, because, we learn, it's not until you get to these points, or when you've done some things that you're thinking, oh my God, have I damaged my child? We all have those feelings in our hearts and our souls. But, here's the thing. When we become human and we teach our humanity, because, showing our heart, there's nothing wrong. We're not perfect. We'll never be perfect.
That's so true, Glenda. And you actually brought three amazing points that I kind of want to point out separately. Number one thing to keep in mind is it takes a stronger person to admit that they failed, that they're wrong. And again, based on my experience, even working with my clients, people have a hard time saying sorry, especially to their children. So the fact that you were able to be vulnerable and apologize to your child speaks huge volume about you as a mother and as a person. But that brings me to my second point that shows that you took your experience, because you know how you said like you kind of felt lonely even though you were loved. And one thing I've learned is that every human being goes through a negative experience and traumas in their childhood.
Yes.
Now, the kicker is how the person comes out of that negative experience.
Sure.
And there's two ways. I call them better and bitter. So the bitter way is when you see parents saying, well, I was beaten as a child and look at me, I survived. So therefore I'm going to beat my children and I'm going to treat them the same poor way that I was treated.
Because that made me strong.
Exactly. Whatever the person justifies themselves, like treating somebody else that way, whether it's a child, whether it's the spouse, it's really irrelevant, because the point there is that the person is going from the bitter side of them, from the side that it's hurting, rather than the better side by saying, you know what, I didn't have that great of a parents, so I'm going to be better. I'm going to do better. And I'm going to give to my children what wasn't given to me. Which brings me to the third point. I remember about a couple years ago, when I was studying parenting in psychology, I realized that, yes, I caused a lot of traumas that are obvious to my children, but there was also a lot of traumas that weren't that obvious and were sort of hidden within. And it was very important to me before I start working with other people to make sure that I work things on to myself. And that's where I think my line of work is very powerful in terms of results, because I don't just use the book knowledge, I use personal knowledge. Everything that I preach, everything that I teach, I've been through, I went through, and I sort of put behind me. So I can not only tell the person the path, but I can show them the result, because that's what I got at the end. So I remember talking to my children and explaining to them that no one's perfect and neither am I. And as much as we look at our parents as their gods and they know it all, I told my kids, I'm so sorry, I do not know it all. Nobody gave me a parenting book. Nobody gave me a manual how to raise good human beings. And I told them, honestly, I've been just winging it and hoping that I hit the nail on the head. And I told them that I believe that there are certain things that, yes, I did do great, but there are certain things that I might have failed them in. And I really, I did it one-on-one with each child, and I gave them an opportunity to speak up about things that really triggered them, things that caused them trauma, to give them the chance at having a closure with me rather than going into therapy once they're older. Because I think that helping your children process those negative things while they're still little is very liberating. Because as a grown-up, they will go into a grown-up life knowing that there is no baggage or resentment.
I love that. Yeah, I agree with you.
So much sense. Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, we're handed this little infant and we walk out with it. And, I can't tell you how many times I'm like, what do I do? And you do your best, but they have, every single person born is different. What I did for one, the other might not necessarily have liked, and vice versa. And so you just kind of go on gut feeling and a prayer and hope it all works out. And I'm very lucky, for the most part. We've had a few ups and downs, and not really confrontations, but we try to talk it out. And, she climbed in my lap today, so there's something there.
There's a lot of love there.
I was more thrilled than she was, believe me. Yeah, I'm gonna.
You know what it is? It's going back to being vulnerable. I think if we take the initial conversation sort of where we started, where people grow up thinking that there is something wrong with them, so they start to play a role. I call it an ego, right? Some people refer it on putting on a mask, playing a role, or, in reality, it's just having a fake personality. And the issue with that, with most people, when they play that role, it's very hard for them to remove that mask and be vulnerable and admit that they made mistakes. Because I think that a lot of people are scared to say, I failed, because they worry that people that surround them will turn around and be like, oh my God, you're such a screw up. I don't want to be around you.
Gotcha.
But the funny part is, if those people don't want to be around you because you screwed up, those are not your people to begin with.
Right.
You're trying to impress wrong people. And I think that that's where, that sadness come from, that Glenda, you brought up. And actually my son noticed it too. Yesterday I went for a walk and he goes, Mom, everybody just frowning. People look so miserable. I wonder why. And I explained to him that it's because they're carrying that pain. They're carrying that baggage. They feel very locked in the role that they're playing, so they cannot be free. They cannot be themselves. They cannot express it. And that's where the weight of guilt comes in, because guilt is extremely heavy feeling that weighs you down. And the only way to get rid of it is to open up, apologize, and admit that something wrong did take place. But again, most people are scared to do that because they worry that they're going to be put down even more after admitting that they did something wrong. Yeah. So it's very hard nowadays for people to be vulnerable because they just worry to be rejected.
And it's such a superpower if you use it. I can tell if someone is being vulnerable, and it's just like a breath of fresh air for me. It's like, oh my gosh, this person's real. Instead of, we talk about the ego coming into play, and it's like, who are you? You don't even know yourself if you have to do that. Someone that's vulnerable does know themselves, and they know their worth, and they know, like, just like you said, if someone judges them, it's not their people.
100%. If I may add, Nicole, I have this saying that if people don't love and accept you how you are and for who you are, they're simply not your people. Because unconditional love starts with unconditional acceptance. However, if the person doesn't love him or herself unconditionally, which means they don't accept him or herself unconditionally, they cannot accept unconditionally people around them. So when somebody is critical, when somebody is judgmental, when somebody gives another person a hard time for making a mistake, that's a clear sign that that person is extremely hard on themselves. Yes. So if the person judges somebody, believe me, they judge themselves. If they are hard on somebody else for making a mistake, they're even harder on themselves for making that mistake. And that goes back to human being, in my opinion, human consists of three parts. The body, which is our avatar in the physical form, our soul, which is sort of our heart. I always say that our soul is somewhere in here, where our ego is in our mind. That's where the logic comes, the calculation comes. And I think that's where the role comes in, because we think with our brain that we know what people want from us. But in reality, Nicole, you're right. People want us to be vulnerable. And I think that's why usually when I get approached by new clients, they say, what makes you different from other people? And again, it's not all that people are not being real, but I find that even with some psychologists, when they counsel somebody, they're not going through experience, but they just going by the book. However, when you work with somebody who have self-love, who has that self-acceptance, the only thing they can do towards another human being is accept them. So I find that when I work with somebody, the person doesn't need to play a role or doesn't need to put on a mask or be fake, because I'm being real. Because when you come in contact with somebody who is real, who's transparent, and who's vulnerable, the first thing you want to do is take off and stop playing that role and be yourself. But the problem is, again, I would say that 80% of a population are not really self-aware. They don't recognize that they're playing a role. And that's sort of where that heaviness in your heart comes in, because you're not living through your soul. You're not living your true purpose. You're just trying to fulfill the obligations that other people put on you.
Yes, you want to be who you think people think you should be.
Yes, 100%. Yeah. And I think that's where it that's where it's important to know that you do things out of love rather than out of obligation. So
Yes.
if you're, I don't know, in a relationship and you're cooking because you think you have to, it will never work long term. So I always tell people, do what makes you you.
Yeah.
Do things that bring you joy, because A, you're going to be successful at doing it. B, the passion of you doing it will shine through because it's true to your nature.
Yes.
And C, other people will feel it and it will ignite their light, because the more real we are, the more we open up as humans.
Yeah.
Others that surround us want to do the same because they see the liberation, they see the freedom. And I think that's truly what it's all about, is about being free from within and feeling like you're great just the way you are.
Absolutely.
Every little thing about you, no matter whether it's good or bad, it's you. And
100%.
we have to start accepting ourselves for being who we are, because that's what it's all about.
100%. I think that our souls, if we look at spirituality, I believe that our souls come onto this planet to go through different experience. Good, bad, it's very subjective, I would say. And the reason I'm calling it subjective is because there is benefit in every experience. Yes, it might not be pleasant, but that will be a lesson that will help you get to a next stage of your life. And I think that's where people look at problems as, oh my God, this is a disaster, my life is falling apart, rather saying, you know what can I learn from this experience? How can I make myself stronger? And how can I grow from this experience and be better?
But Julie, I'm going to interrupt you.
Yes.
You know what? It is not usually at the time where the storm is that you're looking at it that way. Like, I can honestly tell you, through my biggest storms in my life, it's never been about what can I learn while I'm in that storm. It's in the storm, when you're in the eye, it's how am I going to get out? How can I survive? It's only after you out of the storm that you can honestly look at it and say to yourself, you know what did happen there that I can take from it? You start to form the gratitude. For every storm, there's gratitude in there. There's something in there that made you stronger. That when you walk out, you go, holy shit, did I make it through that? I can't believe I've done it. Because that's how I've done. It's like, wow, it really worked out for I was too busy as I was going through things. And this is what happens. You don't beat yourself up. If you're in the storm, feel the storm, live through the storm. You're in survival mode. If we're talking about real storm, I'm not talking about the fingernail being broken. I'm talking about,
of course, but
you're going through a divorce, your bankruptcy, or whatever. You're looking at how you can, to survive through it. If you're in an ocean, you're not looking at what am I going to learn from this right now. You're in survival mode. But afterwards, yes, then you're going to be going through, looking back and saying, hey, okay, holy shit, I did make it through. Things really did work out the way I wanted them to do it. But now, what can I learn from that? Wow, did I promote through that? Start patting yourself on the back. Start looking at that. That's a huge accomplishment. And that's how we start forming who we are. But during that time,
I 100% agree with you, Glenda. And if I may add, I think that's where it's important. I think that's where coaching comes in.
yes.
Because I think during the storm, the most important thing is not to lose the balance. Because you know how you said when you're in the eye of it and everything is just spinning around you and going out of control, finding that center is very, very important. And I think that's what makes that experience smoother for the person. And I think that's where coaching comes in. And that's where I think coaches are very powerful tool to use when you do go through storms. because it's another person that can help you stay afloat. And again, if we're using, let's say, ocean example, right? You're in the ocean, in that storm. A coach is like a floating device. Yes, you're still going through the storm, but guess what? There's somebody there helping you stay above the water.
Okay, I agree, but I will respectfully, in some respects, disagree.
Okay, I want to hear your point. I'm really excited. I love when people disagree with me. Please.
I agree with you because, but in some ways, but when you're in a storm, when things are going, and I understand about having a proper coach because, hello, that's my life. And I'm here to help people battle, but life isn't balanced when you're going through the storm. That is personally through and from all the people that I've coached, you're not in a balanced situation when you're making it through the storm. Your life is very much imbalanced at that point. Like I said, it depends on the type of a storm. But if you're in the middle of losing your business, if you're in the middle of a really horrible divorce, if you're in the middle of that, you've just lost a loved one or that, your life is totally imbalanced. It is only after with having that love and support, if you're lucky enough to be wise enough to go through that and have that person who will be reminding you of that. But as I say, once you're in the middle of your storm, everything is in balance. You're in a survival mode. At every point, if you look at a divorce, you look at it as a career that's fallen, or a business gone, a loved one, God forbid, who has been died. You're living in a very imbalanced part of life at that point. You are totally grasping at that point just to make it through maybe that day, maybe that moment, to you can get back onto land, so to say, where you can sort of catch your breath and say, okay, now where can I walk to? What is my next step at that point? But when those seas are rocky, I don't know. The world is very imbalanced.
Yeah, you know what? You make a very, very good point, and I 100% agree with you. And I think that maybe my perspective is a tad different, just because I am a very optimistic person. For me, glass is always half full.
I get it, but I'm just saying, like, Nicole, what do you think?
I would, from my perspective of what I went through when I was in the middle of my storm, it was so painful that my mind was just rife with thoughts that weren't even natural thoughts to me. And I did have coaches, I did talk to people, but it didn't really help, because I was in a whole different mentality, and it was a very painful mentality. And I'll go even one step further, is I didn't see what happened to me until after I healed myself. So I went through the pain of divorce. I went through, living on my own with just my girls, but I still wasn't who I was capable of being, or even understanding what I had gone through, because I was seeing it through very, very closed vision, I guess. And it was till I opened up to the enormity of what that situation was, and I cleared away all the trauma in my body, all the hurt in my body, understanding that, what he did is a reflection of him, not of me. I mean, I can't tell you the books I read, which actually for me was better than a coach. So at that time, so it was learning about me, it was learning about spirituality, it was learning about myself, it was learning about healing, it was learning about releasing all the trauma that was in my body and more. I used many modalities to heal. I use sound, I use cellular memory, I use the trauma healing. And only when I felt right with myself, in a place where I could place my feet and feel steady, then I could look back and see what I learned to bring forward to help others. But like you said, Glenn, during the storm, nothing was going to help me at that point.
Let me ask you, ladies, I'm actually really, really curious to know. If you take yourself as you are right now, in terms of self-awareness and things that you've learned and know, if we were to put you as you are right now into that storm back then, would it be different? Or do you think you would still be feeling the same? Or do you think you'd be able to grasp the balance easier?
Well, with the healing, I could be placed right back in there, but I didn't have the healing. So it's one of those that, you really don't know. But I can tell you with forgiveness, with Ho'oponopono, with releasing all the animosity towards my ex and using forgiveness for myself first and then for him, I can speak to him, I can talk to him. But when all that was going on with the cheating, the lying, the pain of everything that I was experiencing, I couldn't think straight. I couldn't see straight. There was nothing that was right in my world, and everything was fight or flight at that point. And there's so much, you can call it monkey mind, if you will. Your mind is just spinning 24/7 that you can't hear your downloads of higher self. You can't hear your downloads from your guides. You can't hear I mean, literally when I went through that, and I am clairaudient. I get messages all the time. And for about 2 months, I couldn't hear anything. It scared me so badly to
Wow.
think that I was going to lose that. And finally, I just went off, and I did a lot of meditating, a lot of praying, and a lot of self-talk to get that back. That was something I'd never not had, and it really scared me. So it was that intense that I thought I was going to lose my clair abilities at the time.
Okay. Yeah, I see it, because the reason I asked that question, and Glenda, I still want to hear your answer, is because I was just thinking about myself, and I'm going to be very vulnerable and open with you. I was thinking, okay, now with the self-awareness that I have, I wonder if, let's say, something like divorce were to hit me, how would I go through it? Would I feel like I'm in the middle of the storm, or would I be able to find my balance? And interesting enough, in my mind, I'm thinking, oh, I'll be just fine. I'm going to concentrate on the positive things. I'm going to think of all the dating and all the exciting things that comes with being single again. But I wonder if it's just an illusion. And the reason I'm wondering it is because on one hand, I want to give out sort of an advice and say, hey, don't wait till storm hits you to deal with it. Become self-aware before something negative happens, because it makes you stronger and more prepared. But then, does it really, Glenda? What are your thoughts?
Okay, well, I got lots of thoughts. And the first thing that was in my mind when you're telling me about being balanced through the storm, I was thinking to myself, I bet you she's never been through a divorce. Because I knew that right away. Like, you've never been through a divorce. Have you lost your parents? Like, when I had at one point in time with running a business, 2 babies to look after, a mother with dementia, a father that already died of cancer, and I had 2 brothers that I had to emotionally, physically take care of and find places for everybody to live and get help with. I had 2, 4, 5. I had like 6, and I took my mother-in-law into my house because she was not well, and I couldn't travel to go to bring her. So I brought her to my house because I had all of these people. My life was filled with everybody else. Now, do you think I had balance during that time? Excuse me, no fucking way. My world was spinning at that point, but somehow I still made it through. But I'll go back even more so. When I went through the time where I went through my first divorce, 12 years into marriage, 2 young kids, very neurotic and narcissistic people that I was involved with, had lost all my confidence, got to a point where I was with a very wealthy family. They took me to the cleaners, took me in and out of court till I was like $200,000 in debt. Didn't have a dime in the bank. The bank accounts were emptied. I had 2 children that were under the age of 6. I was a stay-at-home mom at that time. So at that point, had been out of work for close to, at that point, it was probably 6, 7 years. So a woman who's not been into the workforce and all the rest, I lost all my confidence. And I had worried of where I was going to find the next dime to buy milk. Seriously.
Wow.
Okay. Now, through that time, and that was a horrible time through my life, but somehow I found the way of getting myself up. That's where I found my voice again and looked after myself. I supported, I took myself in court and spoke out my words to the judge. And I looked after my own case from that point on, because nobody was hearing me of what I was living through, and not me, but my children, more importantly. But the second time of going through a relationship where there was a lot of infidelity and I was blown away, I knew from what I went through the first time, yes, I became much smarter that time. When I found out, instead of saying, because I left the first time thinking, oh, he's going to be honorable. Yes, he's going to be fair. Yeah, right. People change when they go through divorce. All of a sudden that anger comes out. All of a sudden that meanness comes out. And all of a sudden they don't give a shit what happens to you. I'm being real.
Yeah.
Because that's what happens, right? There's different personalities that come out. And then they don't even sometimes, and I say sometimes because not all that, but sometimes they don't even care about their child, their children. They care about hurting the significant other. Because why? Probably because of rejection or something like that. But what I learned the second time around is that's when I got my ducks in order. That's when I prepared and I got everything lined up. So when I did tell him what I found out, and when it was time for me to leave, 9 months later, I was totally self-sufficient. I was set up, my life. I had set up a new business. I had done everything. So that when I left, I basically walked away, said, bye now, don't contact me again. Here's my lawyer. That's it.
Wow.
Yes, you do become different when you go through something another time, when things are rocking. But when you are hit emotionally with things, that's why my heart really breaks and goes out to people, because I get it. I'm very heart-centered. I'm very much into protecting my loved ones. I'm a Taurus mom. I'm a big mama bear. I look after. If I love you, you got my world. But if you hurt me in a vicious way, walk away, because then that brings out the lioness in me. So whether your life is balanced, going back to where it started, this whole thing about being real and being vulnerable, when we are hurt and we have lost somebody, or we have lost something that we have worked hard for or whatever, no way can anybody stay balanced. And that is something, it's not being unreasonable. You'll find balance when you find land again. But during the tornado, during the waves, you're trying to survive in that moment of that hardship. And that's
so true.
You just keep your head about yourself and you say, okay, this is how I make it through when shit happens in my life. What is my next step? Like when I went through that last time when I went through, my first thing was my end goal was having a home for me and my children. And then that's my end goal. But right now, what is my next step? My first step is breathe, because we start to breathe in a very shallow way, and we start to and we don't allow our bodies to work, because when we start that, then we're not thinking really clearly in our head. So if we can start to breathe in that way and start to live through what we need to go through, but we need to feel it, because if we don't, then what we do is we bury ourselves, and the anger and resentment lives within us.
Yeah,
that's so true.
And we don't want to end up that way. There's nothing being worse. I learned through the time when my ex was trying the first time to bury me, I said to him, you know what? I don't need your money. Somehow I'll make it through. I don't want all this hostility. It's not healthy for me, and it's not healthy for my children. The kids cannot live through this anymore. And if you keep going this way, you're going to end up hurting. I give up. I'm not looking. I will always go and represent myself in court, but I will never now go through another lawyer. I will come in and represent myself. You're not going to eat away any money that I don't have anymore. And what ended up happening? He ended up dying a very slow, horrendous death, and I'm not going to get into that, but
Yeah.
it totally ate away at his body in very vicious, horrible ways. And it was very sad to see that he didn't want to let go of that hurt and resentment because he allowed it to keep going on. And that's what we have to learn is, and we talked about this morning, sometimes when you realize where people are coming from what they've learned in their previous, when they were a child or things like that, that's really who they are. And that's what, how we learn to accept them from these type of things, that we can get rid of them, become more understanding and get rid of the hurt, because that only is going to hurt us. And if we hurt, then that means we're going to start hurting others. And what a terrible world if we go out and we keep hurting others. That's a terrible way to be. I'd rather walk around with my heart out and putting my hand out and saying, how can I help you?
So true. So true. But if I may add something to the divorce conversation, and you're right. I mean, I've been with my husband for 20 years now. We've been married for just over 18. Thank you.
Beautiful.
Nice.
It wasn't all smooth sailing. And we did talk about divorce at one point. And I remember it was just a few years back. I realized as I was finding myself that me and him kind of started to grow apart. And I remember sitting down with him and saying, listen, for right now, we still have fuzzy feelings towards each other. But I'm starting to see the gap between us because I'm starting to find myself and going this way. You used to us going the other way and you want to continue going that way. But unfortunately, we're still close, but eventually it won't work. And I remember telling him that I didn't want to wait till the point where we hate each other and we're resentful towards each other and we want to divorce each other because we just have so much hate. Where I would much rather part ways with somebody on a moment of gratitude and realization that, hey, you know what? We got together when I was 19. I'm in my 30s. I'm a different person. You're a different person. People sometimes grow apart, and that's okay. So while we're still at peace, let's make that separation healthy for the both of us, including our children. Where I think a lot of people going back to being scared to fail, they're in denial that their marriage is failing, that they're not feeling the connection. And I think that's where, cheating comes in, where if the person would just admit like, hey, I'm not attracted to you, or I'm not interested in you, or whatever the case may be, and say, you know what, let's part ways now before we hurt each other. I think that's what self-awareness is all about. And I think,
to a point, but I think cheating is another whole level, a different source, and there's all different realities to that. It's not just that cut and dry in that, and we won't get into it because
100%.
We're getting a point. We could keep going on like this, and there's so many questions I haven't even begun to ask.
I know.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know what? This is what part of life is, learning to agree, to disagree, to understand, because my journey has been very different from your journey, but we came together because all three of us are very heart central people.
100%. And I think that it's more than that. I find that our energies match.
Yes.
And it's something along the lines that I do believe that everything is energy. So we are energy as well. Therefore, we produce frequencies. And depending on what frequencies we are, we attract people with similar energies and similar frequencies into our life. So I think that when the person lives through love and self-awareness, especially being true to self, he or she automatically attracts people that have the same mind frame, that can match that energy, that can match that vibe. And that's where things kind of feel very natural and things fall into place. And I think that's very important, to feel with your heart rather than do everything through your brain.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Your heart's your true center. Your
Yes.
heart will tell you. As we raise our vibration, we need to feel our way around, not necessarily use our brain to think our way around.
100%.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yes, it's the guidance of our heart that tells us really who we are and for being who we truly need to be in our lives. And I think that's one of the most special gifts that we've been all given. Unfortunately, not everybody uses it.
That's true. And that is unfortunate. And I just want to thank you, ladies, for having me on your podcast. It's been such a pleasure. Oh my God. I loved hearing your stories. Thank you so much for sharing it. I wish we had more time because there's just so much more to discuss.
That I want to invite you back because we need to talk about
I'd be honored. I'd be very, very happy to do that again because this was just phenomenal.
This is just the beginning. I need to find out more about your approach. You have your knowledge and all the rest. It was just, we never know which way topics are going to turn. And it's not that I'm wrong. It's just that, like I said, our journeys change us to who we are and what we've lived through that teaches us. So, what we've been through in life, it's not to sit back in the history of that. It's just to take that information that we've lived through so we can become wiser, stronger, and we can help others. And that's what it's all about, really, isn't it?
So true. Yes, 100%.
So before we sign off and before we hear Nicole's little bit, two more things. First of all, tell us, give me a golden nugget that we can put out to people that have been watching about you, your coaching, or whatever. Just share something before we leave today.
If you find yourself judging others, and I'm saying you very broadly, it's to whoever can relate to that or whoever's watching it. I think it's important to know that judgment comes from the part of you that compare yourself to others. And if you find yourself judging, means you are comparing. And if you are comparing, that means that you are still not fully wholesome inside. Because again, people that feel complete, people that accept themselves fully, they have no reason to look around and compare themselves with others. And if they don't compare themselves with others, they will never judge others. So it's something to keep in mind and be mindful of and, kind of catch yourself if you ever find yourself judging others.
I love it. I love it. And share with us how we find you.
LinkedIn, Instagram. Very easy to find.
Okay, and we will have we do actually have one of your links below, and so you can reach out to Julia if some of this has given you any type of, you're feeling that there's something missing in your life and you're just not where you need to be. She's certainly the lady to reach out for. She's just got nothing but beauty all surrounding her and great energy.
Thank you. Oh my God, Glenda, you made my day. I'm loving this.
And you and I are definitely going to catch up anyways. We're going to have a meeting together because we don't live too far away.
Exactly. I love that idea. Love it.
Love, me too. Nicole, what can you end with us today about?
In listening and understanding all of the conversations and all of the different thoughts that go along with how things, the storms, the half full, half empty, every single person will be different. Every single situation will be different. That doesn't make it right or wrong because it's happening to you and you have to go with what you're feeling at the time. And your heart might not be in the right place at certain times, but your brain is definitely not in the right place. And that thinking can make you go crazy. And I would tell people, as hard as it might be, to bring yourself back to your inside, to bring yourself back to your heart center and listen and feel. Because if you just listen to your brain, you're going to go crazy because it's chatter, chatter, chatter. And it unfortunately takes in outside chatter. And you have to do what's right with you. And that's when you go back to inside of you and definitely your heart. Just place your hand on your heart to bring awareness to it. And it will start talking to you and lead you back to where you need to be.
And I'll end it in saying, first of all, Julia, thank you very much. You are just a joy. And we, like I said, We can't wait to have you back and really carry
Yes.
in this conversation and furthermore. But here's my last thoughts of no matter what you're going through in your life, just do me one favor for everybody who's watching this. Don't beat yourself up. Give yourself that mercy. Love yourself that little extra, because what happens during those trying times, it's when we really hurt the most and when we need that love the most. And remember, you have to love yourself first before anybody can love you. With
How
that,
beautiful.
I say thank you very much, everybody.